We interview people from across Australia in the footprint of more than 250 Indigenous nations. We recognise and deeply respect our First Nations people, their heritage, cultural beliefs, and close relationship with the land on which we walk, drive, or fly over.
And honestly, Lana, every time I see William wheel away from me, it still seems surreal. I recently read a quote by Neil Danaher, the Australian of the Year, and he said, "I hope to leave a legacy that says no matter the odds, no matter the diagnosis, we all have the power to choose to fight." And I love that. And William is certainly fighting.
Just turn around as quickly as we can.
That blood pressure is not coming up.
Unload the patient.
Is it a big property?
Still breathing okay at the moment.
On a 493, understood, thank you. Put the stretcher back in, shut the door, off we go again.
This is the Flying Doctor podcast, and I'm your host, Lana Howarth. Each week we fly to rural and remote communities across Australia and hear the stories of real-life patients who've needed a call on the Royal Flying Doctor service. Okay, how on earth do I introduce this podcast? I've done over 120 episodes since we started the Flying Doctor podcast, and I've been humbled to interview some of the most amazingly resilient and strong people across the country. But I do think my guest in this podcast is going to take the award for embodying the Aussie spirit in terms of courage and persistence in the face of adversity. Louise takes an ocean swim every day, and it helps her stay grounded and focused. Let's learn about her journey.
This podcast has been made possible with the support of Isuzu Ute Australia, a major national partner of the Royal Flying Doctor Service and also the sponsor of the Flying Doctor podcast series.
Hello, Louise.
Hello, Lana. How are you today?
I'm okay. Did I shock you with that introduction?
I don't have enough tissues here, but I'm good. Deep breaths. Thank you.
Oh, now you live on the York Peninsula in South Australia. That is such a picturesque, amazing part of the world. Did you grow up there or move there later in life?
It is an absolutely incredible place. We absolutely love where we live and we know how fortunate we are. I did grow up there. I grew up in Corny Point, so about half an hour from where I live now, surrounded by coastline. Absolutely the most beautiful place in the world.
Yeah, it's one of those well-kept secrets.
Absolutely.
Now, you're married to John and you've raised 5 amazing children, Edwina, Tom, Lucy, William and Hugo. Having a child every year for 5 years takes a certain kind of woman, in my view. It's a strong and well-organised mother with a huge heart. Did you always want to have a big family?
Oh, that's very kind of you, Lana. Yes, we did. John's the youngest of 9 and I'm one of 5. So it is something that we had always wanted to do. We wanted to be surrounded by a large family. We love the thought of having our children close together. Not quite sure what we were thinking at the time. It was absolutely delightful. And, in hindsight, having them while we were young and having them close together has been a really amazing thing and really helpful for us now.
And you said that you come from a large family with many siblings, yourself and John. Does that mean that there's an extended family within the region as well that you can rely on? Or are you and John, have you been going through this journey sort of just coping with family life alone?
Look, it's been tough. We don't have any grandparents at home. My mum was widowed quite early, so she moved to Adelaide, and we do have an incredibly large family, an enormous amount of cousins, as our children say, and they love. Not a lot of them live near us, but some do, and we're very fortunate for that.
That's great. So tell me about that farm, and I understand you're not living there at the moment. You've leased that farm out, but what do you love about that property, that piece of land?
We do actually still live on the family farm. We, for various reasons, have lived in Adelaide for the last couple of years. We're home a lot more now, but we still live where the children grew up. Look, we're right on the beach. We open the back gate and we step onto the sand. It's just a picturesque place that is really, really special to all of us and our extended family, and we love to look after that. And to be able to enjoy that all together.
What sort of size is the property and could you describe the landscape?
So we're about 6,000 acres.
That's substantive.
Look, it is, but we leased that to a couple of families nearby. And in the past, we've had cattle and sheep and cropping, so mixed farming, which my husband really enjoyed and our children loved. And that's how I grew up as well.
It's an interesting dynamic, though, because normally when I talk to people from all around the country that are involved in agriculture in some way, most of them don't have a back door that empties onto the beach. So I think that's got to be best of both worlds in many ways.
Absolutely. Look,
Yeah.
we understand how incredibly fortunate we are. We have a bit of a campground at that particular gate, and at Easter time, we can have up to 45 people who are all probably first cousins or immediate family around the campfire. So it's pretty special, and we love to share that.
That's lovely. Now, your youngest son, Hugo, who is now in his 20s, was born with Down syndrome. Can you talk about his arrival and the challenges that Hugo endured as an infant?
Yeah, sure. Look, we did have 5 children in 6.5 years, and that was entirely our choice. I was a school principal at the time and had taken intermittent leave in between having each of the children to make it work, and we did make it work between John and I. Hugo, being our fifth child, was born at 37 weeks, so a little bit early. At 3 days of age, we were whizzed off. He was born, at Yorktown Hospital, not far from home, where all the other children were born. And we felt completely comfortable with that because we knew if something went wrong, we were a quick flight from safety in Adelaide. When Hugo was born, I just had a feeling that something was not the same as the other children. And I felt, and I said to John, that I feel like he has some characteristics of a person with Down syndrome. And it was about day 3 that this came to the fore and some cord blood was sent to Adelaide, and we, John and I and the 5 children, drove to Adelaide, and we did find out, in fact, that he did have an extra chromosome. Just after that moment, and I can still feel that cold feeling going from the top of my body to the bottom when we were told that, yes, he did have Down syndrome, the specialist listened to Hugo's heart and realised that something wasn't quite right there. So on the same day, we found out that he had a AVSD, which is atrioventricular septal defect. So the top half of his heart didn't form.
Wow.
Yeah, so things from there got pretty chaotic. He was a failure to thrive baby, and if you saw him now, that you would just be blown away. That is not how I would describe Hugo. He was nasogastric fed. He wasn't strong enough to have the heart surgery until he was 2. But for the first 6 months, living with the 7 of us at home on the farm, we lived with 7 suitcases packed and open in the hallway because we had weekly visits to the Women's and Children's Hospital, who were amazing here in Adelaide. And at any time, we could have been off to Melbourne to have Hugo's surgery. So that didn't happen for 2 years.
So for 2 years, you have to wait till your son is old enough and, I guess, stable enough and capable to withstand heart surgery, and his heart wasn't fully formed. What does that mean in terms of the impact on him? How does his, and this is a very ignorant question, and I apologize if I'm being a bit naive, but how, if his heart didn't fully form, what impact did that have on him on a day-to-day basis as you're waiting for that 2 years for him to qualify to be able to get the surgery to fix the problem?
Look, he was a very floppy, little, tired, fatigued baby who didn't do well. And again, failure to thrive is how he was described. And to see the turnaround in him now is just incredible. But that meant a lot of my time in particular was needed to be spent with him, feeding him through the nasogastric tube, also breastfeeding him. Overnight, he was fed through the tube. The children were incredible, but it also meant a large load on John. Trying to work, I was on leave, obviously, trying to work, but also helping me with the other children that were all under 6. Hugo, he's quite a character.
I'm not going to walk painstakingly through that, but how did it impact you as parents to have to try to manage that circumstance with Hugo while you've got a house full of a menagerie of children running around under the age of 6?
A tinsy bit of chaos. And for the first few months, our beautiful rural community and our friends and family were incredible. I think it was 5 o'clock every night. Someone would arrive at our door. They would come with a meal for 7 people, and no questions asked. They'd fold some washing if it was on the table or the floor or wherever it was, and they'd be off again. So
Wow.
we survived and trod water, definitely, but it was really survival. But it was our family and friends and our beautiful community that helped us get through that. It was a pretty tough time. Ordinarily, you would have the surgery earlier, but he just wasn't strong enough and he wouldn't have made that through. So by the time he was 2, he was a little bit more on track, and miraculously, a little flap of skin had grown inside his heart. So that helped him to get through and to get stronger. So, there is some really positive things that came from that. But the other children, I think, for them, it has made them the most incredibly resilient people. And they often say, and they will all say it, that they are so much better people for having Hugo in their lives, which is a really nice thing to say. And they all get on beautifully.
So let's go back to after the surgery with Hugo. Would you be able to describe for me what like a regular day was for you with the family, with work, with the farm? What's a typical day back then?
Yes, when the children were younger, it was incredibly busy, as it is with a young family, but having them all so close together, and John and I really wanted to keep things as typical, I guess, as we could for the other children. And that meant in the country, lots of sport, lots of driving. Every 2 weeks, generally me, would bring Hugo to Adelaide for early intervention with Down Syndrome Australia, which was incredibly helpful for him until he started at preschool, at the local preschool. So that's once a fortnight to town, 3 hours or 6-hour round trip. Often I'd have Will, who was only 2 at the time, and John would deal with the rest in amongst his work day. So, yeah, and then there was lots of therapy for Hugo, lots of speech, lots of physio, just to help him. He was so hypertonic or floppy, so he didn't sit up until he was 12 months old, which was really tricky. I remember one day taking the children all to the local swimming lessons, which is at the beach where we live, getting them all down the stairs and getting onto the sand, and it was really hard, and you probably wouldn't know this unless you know, but having a child of that size not being able to sit up, it just made things really tricky. He didn't walk until he was 18 months old. All of those things mean there have to be other considerations around the other children and keeping them safe and keeping them happy and fed.
Yeah.
It just made life a lot more complex, I guess, and we were tired.
I know how tired I was when I had a young family, so I can't even fathom what you were feeling. Now, does Hugo have any other physical challenges as a consequence of either the Down syndrome or other complications relating to that?
Yeah, sure. Look, he's had a really complex health history. He is vision and hearing impaired, wears hearing aids. He has leukopenia, which is a really low white count. So he would generally, not so much, and I touch wood in saying this, become unwell and then become really unwell really quickly. He had a course of GCSF, which is something that's given as a daily injection for 12 months, and that's similar to what's used for patients having chemotherapy, and it tricks your body or your white cells into thinking that they're better than they are, really. It makes your body stronger. And that really turned his health around. But still, and since COVID, he's now developed epilepsy. So he has a huge amount of health issues. And you just never know when things are going to go wrong. We recently went to Port Lincoln for a family wedding, and he had a stomach pain, started being violently ill, and we spent 5 days in hospital in Port Lincoln. His health is really unstable, but in saying that, he's quite well at the moment, and while he's well, we run with that. But when he's unwell, we need to act really quickly. It's really important to be on top of things or ahead of the game, I guess.
Now, you mentioned that Hugo had some challenges in hearing, but was also vision impaired. How much can Hugo see?
Well, he's not actually classified as legally blind, but it was described because he has several different issues that together make his vision very poor, like a floppy optic nerve, so the message doesn't get to his optic nerve like it does for you and I. But it was described to me by his ophthalmologist at the Women's and Children's Hospital. It is as if he is legally blind. So he will walk into a room and someone will say, "Oh, g'day, Hugo," and he'll wave, "Oh, g'day," and he has absolutely no idea who that person is. And certainly with changing light, it makes it really difficult for him seeing traffic. It's quite debilitating for him. But he manages, saying that, he manages really well.
What sort of personality does Hugo have, and have you sort of witnessed develop over time?
He's hilarious.
Like, if he calls himself a rock star, I reckon he's got to be an absolute ripper. So tell me a little bit about Hugo.
He does. Look, he is an absolute delight. He's hilarious. He's a comedian. He just brings so much joy. He just pulls people in. He has a fabulous personality. He's endearing. He loves to look after people. He's caring. He's really thoughtful. And he has a really incredible sense of social justice, which can sometimes get him into trouble. But he likes to have a voice, and with the various roles that he has at the moment, he certainly has a voice and he's making a difference. And he said to us, Lana, it was about 7, I want to make a difference for people, or I want to make life better for people who or children who have Down syndrome, and he's doing an incredible job of making a difference.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're really proud of him.
Let's talk about your husband, John. So about 10 years ago, in the middle of a very busy crop seeding, you had an urgent phone call from one of your children, Tom. Would you be able to tell me what that phone call was?
Sure. So Tom was home from uni. He was doing ag science. He was home to help on the family farm with seeding. It was a Wednesday. I was home from work. And he said, "Mum, I think Dad might be having a stroke." What do you mean? He said, "Well, I can't understand what he's trying to say, and it sounds like he's talking with food in his mouth," which is a really big pet hate of John, so it wouldn't have been happening. "And he can't get over the fence." So Tom and John's brother Paul got him home to me, and we got him off to hospital, and he had in fact had a stroke. He was flown to Adelaide by the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and we spent best part of the next 6 months living in Adelaide and commuting between home and town, as we call it, while he had rehabilitation. So that was a really tough time, and John hasn't been able to return to the life, I guess, that he had because of the damage done to his heart. So virtually half of his brain was flooded with a bleed, and so he's lost a lot of his executive functioning ability, and that makes a huge difference just in day-to-day living. But just recently, so he still had a lot of health issues or heart issues in the past 10 years, but just recently he's had a really good report and things are looking good for him, which is great.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but heart stroke and vascular is the top killer in Australia, and in rural and remote areas it is the one that we at the Royal Flying Doctor Service get called out for the most.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of podcasts that talk to some innovation in this space, and one of them is a helmet which is being piloted at this very moment in South Australia, mind you, right where you are as well, which essentially enables a patient to be diagnosed very quickly as to whether it's a clot or a bleed, because when you have a stroke, they have to determine which it is, and the medication is different depending on which it is. The good news is that when somebody does have a stroke, they can be rehabilitated and they can recover a lot of what they lose over time. They can work at it and manage it. How's John taking it? How's he coping with this change of life? Because it is pretty significant, isn't it, as in terms of its impact?
It absolutely is. And look, John was 49 when he had the stroke, and he was the fittest farmer going around. He really was. But he'd lived with atrial fibrillation since he was in his early 20s, but he'd always managed that. It is in some way stress related. So that, it's a complete change of lifestyle for John, and, loss of identity as a farmer and a massive contributor to our local community in lots of ways. And so that's really tough, and a change of circumstances. I went back to full-time work and he became Hugo's primary carer, and yeah, just life has changed in lots of ways, and in the last 2 years, John has been through 9 cardioversions, which is where the heart is stopped and restarted just to try and get him back into rhythm.
Wow.
I can't imagine, every time I say goodbye to him before he has that procedure, I am in awe of his strength and, again, his resilience. And he just says, I'll be right. And then I'll pick him up and he is a new man. But then sometimes it goes out again and we go through the process again. Recently, due to an ablation, or successful ablation, should I say, it hasn't happened for a while. And again, I get really nervous talking about when the going's good, just because of our history.
It doesn't jinx it, I swear. I promise, Louise, we won't jinx anything.
Perfect.
This podcast has been made possible with the support of Isuzu Ute Australia. Have you seen any of our 7 large RFDS flight simulators as they move around Australia? Attending school, community or field days. Each is being towed by an Isuzu D-Max Ute, courtesy of Isuzu Ute Australia. Reliable vehicles are imperative in the harsh Australian outback, and the Isuzu D-Max and MUX vehicles are the perfect match for the long-distance heavy towing demands of these simulators right across Australia. To learn more, search Isuzu Ute online.
Okay, so rehab has obviously been a long and slow process over years for John, without wanting to then pile on to you. Your son William had an accident just a few years ago. Would you mind telling me about that?
Yes, so Will was 23 and it was 2.5 years ago. He was a passenger in a vehicle accident not far from home. And he now lives with quadriplegia. He is an absolutely incredible human. He spent 216 days, I think, in intensive care in the Royal Adelaide, in rehab at Door Park at the spinal unit. And he's actually still living in Adelaide in an apartment because he'd bought his own house at 21, not far from home, or just up the road from us. Incredibly capable young man, so fit, active, healthy, determined, which has come in handy.
I wonder where he gets it from, Louise.
We're just waiting for his house has actually been modified as we speak, but we just can't wait to get him home. So he's in a manual chair, which we were told he would never be anything other than an automatic chair. His determination is quite incredible, and it's been the most devastating time for all of us, but no one more so than for Will. And we have tried to move on and tried to be positive about things because we've still got Will and we're really lucky, and we know how lucky we are. We have other friends and family that haven't been so lucky. It doesn't mean that it's not absolutely devastating. And honestly, Lana, every time I see William wheel away from me, it still seems surreal. It really hasn't hit home. I recently read a quote by Neil Danaher, the Australian of the Year, and he said, I hope to leave a legacy that says no matter the odds, no matter the diagnosis, we all have the power to choose to fight. And I love that. And William is certainly fighting. He fights every morning to get up. He fights to get in his car, which he's now driving on his own. I've never heard Will complain, not once, in the 2.5 years since he was injured. In rehab, he said to me, Mum, I saw how hard you were all fighting and I couldn't not fight. And it would be really easy to give up, but I'm not going to. And that just drives us and inspires us to keep going. And we are here to do anything we can do to help him move forward and to live a fantastic life, because there's lots to look forward to.
Oh, you're making me cry.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You know, I firmly believe that what we endure makes us stronger. And I don't think there's a single person in this big country of ours that hasn't been through some crap. What we endure makes us stronger. And I think you're right in that how we take that, when you look for the opportunities rather than giving up, that's where that tenacity and that spirit shows.
And, I think, well, I listened to quite a few podcasts as just one of our sons, Tom, and he said to me recently, Mum, we all have an obligation to be the best people we can be. And we try and live like that. And I think, looking at Hugo and how he started out in life and the things he's achieved, it's just so important to strive to be the best person you can be. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm sharing the story of our journey. And you're very right. Everyone has a journey. Hopefully it will show people, or could show people, what you can do and what you can overcome if you have to.
Absolutely.
It's certainly not the journey or the pathway that we thought our family would take, but it is what it is, and we have to make the most of that. Because what's the alternative, Lana? You can lay down, or you can keep going and make the most of what you've got. And I hope that that's what we're doing.
Let's go back to William, because William has not just gotten out of bed and into that chair and into the car and gotten on with his life as a 23-year-old. And I say that as a mum of an 18-year-old. Not only has he done that, but tell me about his wheelchair rugby, because that's just remarkable.
Yeah, so Will has found a beautiful community in South Australia. He was introduced to a young man of similar age to him in a wheelchair when he was in rehab. His name is Ty, and he played wheelchair rugby. And Will has had a lifetime of sport, playing football, basketball, tennis. It was an everyday thing for our children, and living in the country, that's what you do. So wheelchair rugby has really given Will something to look forward to, something to absolutely hone his energy in on and to focus on. And as we speak, Lana, he's actually in Melbourne at the Australian Wheelchair Rugby Emerging Talent Camp. So
Oh, that's fantastic.
could not be prouder of him, and, as you say, his tenacity and drive to be the best person he can be and make the most of the situation that he's found himself in. He's been in a chair for 2.5 years. He was the South Australian Player of the Year for wheelchair rugby and in the Australian Div 2 All-Stars team. Unbelievable. All of this he didn't tell us about until well past the Oh, yeah. Did I mention that?
Just the underachiever, humble underachiever. Yeah, underachiever.
Absolutely, which is the way he is.
You go, William. I'm so impressed. And then let's talk a little bit more about the rock star, Hugo, because he's a huge high achiever as well. Would you tell me a little bit about his advocacy and what he's done competing in Australia and in France and in Fiji? Let's talk about that.
Sure. Look, he is a passionate advocate for inclusion and diversity, and we've certainly encouraged that. And he loves to be a role model, and he'll tell you, I'm a good role model and I'm an inspiration. Which is fantastic. And, he now does motivational speaking. Hugo is not able to read or write, and that's not something that's typical of people with Down syndrome, but he's just never been able to do that. So we support him, his family support him with lots of visuals. When he's giving a talk, we're with him, or his work mentors are with him and support him. He does the most incredible job. And it's when he's ad-libbing that he really gets the crowd in. We recently spoke to a school in Loxton where there was a young fellow, Owen, who is 7 years of age, and his family invited Hugo and their school to speak to their community, spoke to 250 people, because they wanted their community to see the potential that their son had. So Owen is 7 with Down syndrome, and that's, as a parent, is absolutely heartwarming and so fabulous that Hugo can share what is possible with support and love and opportunities. And, that has meant for us, I guess, a lot of driving. We drive around 1,000 kilometres a week because Hugo is actually number one in the world for people with Down syndrome for shot put and discus. He holds 3 world records.
Oh my gosh.
He recently won the SA Life and Brand SA Young Emerging Leader of the Year. He was a finalist in the Young Australian of the Year in South Australia. He is the current person who's won the South Australian SA Sport Para Athlete of the Year 2 years in a row. He just does the most incredible
He is a rock star.
And he is a rock star, self-appointed rock star. He's living a life, let me tell you.
Wow, that's just incredible. Now, you have since taken on an exciting new position as a coordinator with Down Syndrome Australia. Would you tell me about your job and how what you've experienced and gone through in the last couple of decades influences you and helps you to do that job?
Sure. Look, I've worked as an educational leader for the past 33 years as a school principal, preschool director, and early childhood leader. It's a job that I have absolutely loved. But for the last couple of years, I've had to take leave, and I'm just not able to commit to the role that I've been doing. But in the last couple of months, I've just taken on a role actually with Down Syndrome Western Australia, but based in South Australia. 2 days a week where I can work from home, which is perfect, or as today I'm working in Adelaide, we're here for athletics. And I'm really excited about that. It's actually a role as an employment connector, which will enable us to offer training programs and employment support and a myriad of other opportunities to people with Down syndrome living across South Australia. But there's so many other things that we can foresee for the future. South Australia is developing a new Down Syndrome Association that is family and community based, and I'm really excited to be a part of leading that happening in the community. Down Syndrome Australia is our overarching body, and South Australia is supported by Down Syndrome Western Australia. Then all of the states and territories have their own organisations. Many of the Down syndrome organisations across Australia offer regional support network groups, which is fabulous. They provide peer support, and often that's done by parents. And this varies from state to state. It's just restricted by funding, but it's something that we're hoping to set up in South Australia. There's already some informal groups running, in particular early childhood groups, and again for the young adult Down syndrome community that Hugo's a part of in South Australia.
So do you find that it enables you to be able to share your learnings and help others who are also parents of children with Down syndrome, or communities or workplaces or whatever it might be, to be able to assist people to better understand the amazing, unique capabilities of persons with Down syndrome?
Absolutely, Lana. And I think that's potentially why I'm in this role, because of my lived experience living with a rock star. And we have a really beautiful community here in South Australia of families with children or young adults with Down syndrome. And it's a really supportive community. And I was really excited to take on this role because I get to, in a more formalised way, share what we've been through, what the knowledge we have, to say, and everyone is different. It's like an able-bodied person. There's lots of different quirks or characteristics, but it's really nice to speak, as in most situations, with other people that have been there before you. So I'm really excited to share that knowledge with others.
That's great. That's really good. So I understand also, Louise, that you're looking to write a book.
I am, Lana. I'm really excited about getting some thoughts down on paper. I'd like to call the book Where There's a Will and Things You Wish You Never Knew, because there are a lot of things I wish I never knew, as a mum in particular. During Will's rehab, I'm a list maker, relentless apparently, according to my husband, list maker. But I wrote about 7 journals, and that was just to keep my thoughts clear and to record what was happening each day. And as time went on, over a period of about 18 months, those journals were incredibly important to us. We could share with Will what he was doing a month down the track when things weren't going so well. It became a really lovely thing to look back on. And since, things have become brighter and he's doing incredibly well and we've moved home, it's really nice to look back on those journals, and it's quite cathartic for me too, as a parent, to look back on how far William in particular has come and how far the rest of us have come, because the impact was enormous on our entire family. But the best thing of all was how everyone came together and the way everyone worked together to try and get the best outcome. So yes, writing a book is something I'm actually going to start tomorrow is the day.
It's
Um,
fantastic.
we had Lucy get married at home on the farm, which has been a really big thing for us and so much fun and family. And now I'm going to spend some time just getting my thoughts together. And hopefully, I've really appreciated reading and learning about other people's stories during this period in our life. And I really hope that by sharing our story, or it's my story through a mother's eyes, I guess, or a mother's perspective. It's not William's story, that's for him to share. I hope that it might help other people who are going through challenging times. And I hope that it might perhaps provide them some inspiration or some hope. And I really appreciated being able to find things that did that for me.
Do you have any advice for others that are having a tough time of it?
Oh goodness, advice. It's hard and it's difficult sometimes to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And just off the top of my head, I guess to keep everyone close. That was probably the best thing, is when everyone was together, and to keep taking deep breaths, and to keep, I used to say, trying to put one foot in front of the other. I try not to say that anymore, but Will would be smirking at me.
You can't start vetting your life to be politically correct. If Will does not take offense to you saying putting one foot in front of the other, then I don't think you should stop using that term of phrase, because I think Will would insist that you continue to use it even if he wheels.
He absolutely would, and he is the one that makes us smile. For example, we were at the rehab centre recently, and John, my husband, said, "Do they have many walk-ins here, Will?" Will said, "Not really, Dad." Sorry. You've got to find the humour too. That's another piece of advice. Try and smile and try and laugh, because that is really good for the soul.
It is. Do you think all of this has changed you and changed your perspective on life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It has changed us. We make the most of every opportunity. We do what we can within our means to be the best people that we can be, but also to make the most of the opportunities. Whereas in the past we probably might not have done that, or if an opportunity comes up to travel with Hugo, and recently I've been to France with him and to Europe, and John and I went to Fiji with him to compete earlier last year. We just do that because we can, and we don't know what's around the corner. So we try and make the most of those opportunities and make the most of our lives, and certainly encourage our children to do the same.
It's great advice for anybody. Well, it sounds like, William's got his groove in his new normal. It sounds like John's, going through his rehab and is regaining, as you said, his new sense of self and what that means. And it sounds like Hugo's just continuing to be a rock star, and that you sort of settling into a new role, which really can pull on the capabilities and the skill set and the knowledge that you have to be able to support and help others. So what's next? I mean, I guess it's grandchildren. Are there new grandchildren in this mix?
Funny you should ask. We have just discovered next level love with the arrival of Matilda Primrose. So she arrived 6 months ago, and so they live in, Tom, our son, and his beautiful wife Charlie live in the southeast. So, in fact, a little bit of an intertwined story. William had just gotten his licence back, and he'd been out 20 minutes the other side of the city to collect his vehicle, which had been modified. He'd had lots of training, and Matilda was born, so he drove to Naracoorte, as you do, 4 hours from Adelaide, on his own to see his new niece, which was just precious. And we all, of course, went to see Matilda. We all now fight over her. She's absolutely delicious. And we had our daughter Lucy was married at home on the farm on the weekend, and Hugo walked Matilda down the aisle as the flower girl. And life is good.
That's fantastic. Do you think that your large family, your wonderful children, will end up having large numbers of children just like you and John, and that you will end up with, 13, 15, 20, 25 grandchildren?
Look, it's not something that we've chatted about. We're at a stage in our lives where we had put absolutely no pressure on anyone to have grandchildren, but oh my goodness, we didn't know what we didn't know. It is the absolute best thing in the whole wide world, and we would love if that happened. If it doesn't, that's fine too. We'll continue to fight over Matilda.
I come from a large family myself, and a very large extended family. And my maternal grandfather, who has since passed, but he lived to 102.
Wow.
And we would meet every year. We'd all come together from all across Australia and around the world. We'd all converge into Queensland to where he lived to celebrate each year, because you never quite knew when the last year was going to be.
Absolutely.
And I've never forgotten, because that last gathering, I had my firstborn on my lap, and he was great grandchild number 16. It was one of those photos where you had trouble fitting everybody into the frame, trying to figure out how to get everybody there. I sort of envisioned that that's what you're going to be in about 10, 15 years, Louise, that there's going to be this problem of how to get enough people into the frame with Hugo the Rockstar out the front.
That was to happen for us, it would be absolutely fabulous. We love nothing more than when everyone's home. In fact, over Christmas this year, William's house wasn't quite finished, so he and his beautiful partner Gemma stayed with us. We had, I think it was 10 people, and where we are at the moment, it's not very big. In the end, Tom slept under the Christmas tree on a mattress, but we didn't care. It was hilarious. But everyone was in together and we were all happy. We really enjoyed each other's company and loved nothing more than getting together.
Sounds like an absolutely idyllic family. Thank you so much for coming and having a chat. And I presume, Louise, that you take a nice ocean swim every day just to, I don't know, breathe and take a day at a time and manage life's challenges. Is that right?
Absolutely. Look, I have been doing that for over 12 months now with a group of amazing girlfriends and women at home. Every morning around 6:30, give or take a few minutes, I slide into the ocean. I am a complete and utter thalassophile, lover of the ocean, and that has been since forever. But it does start my day incredibly well. Whenever the rest of my children are home, they'll come for a swim with me. It is just beautiful. I just love the serenity. It sets me up with a positive mindset for the day, and just, as you say, just lets me breathe. And it's sort of a half an hour early, but to myself, and I can get my thoughts together. And I like to be organised and plan the day. Sometimes that doesn't go to plan, but that's how I start.
That's okay. It's been absolutely lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
My pleasure. Great to chat with you, Lara.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode. And thanks again to our major sponsor and major national partner, Isuzu Ute Australia. Isuzu Ute is committed to supporting the communities in which the RFDS operates. To learn more, search Isuzu Ute online.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with family and friends, and subscribe and follow, and then you'll never miss the next adventure. For all the details on how you can share your story with us, join our Facebook group and donate to the Royal Flying Doctor Service. Check out the show notes for details. The Flying Doctor podcast is recorded on Ngunnawal land. It's produced by Sophie Campbell, edited by Mandy Coolin, and I'm your host, Lana Howarth. Catch you next time.